It's a wonderful pleasure to welcome Mary Beth Carty on the show. She is a folk musician hailing from Nova Scotia, Canada. Mary, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Chong.
Yeah, and always a pleasure to welcome you to the show. First, I'd like to extend my congratulations on winning the Canadian Folk Music Awards for Traditional Singer of the Year.
Oh, thank you. I know that this is a podcast, but I just thought I would take the award off my shelf and show you because it's very cool. It's like a little
Oh,
iceberg, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very heavy. So they were joking after the awards ceremony, like everyone who got an award was gonna have to pay extra baggage fees on the way home because it was in St. John's. So it's kind of on the edge of Canada, really. It's way out there. But I did leave an empty space in my little carry-on, surprisingly. I was
Oh,
not expecting to win at all, but I just happened to have an empty space, so it worked out.
I see. So you weren't like expecting to win at all, I suppose.
Oh no, like one never does. Like I'm always just so honored to be nominated, and like all you listen to all the other nominees, and sometimes there's new discoveries there, and everyone is so talented that it's just you never know how it's going to go. It's an anonymous jury that chooses the that votes for their top album or top singer. So like I say, it's just an honor to be nominated. So yeah.
So how did it feel when they announced the winner as yourself?
Oh, I was shaky. I was surprised. I was very emotional. You work so hard I worked so hard for many years on the album, and so many people helped me along the way. So I was just filled with gratitude for all those people who helped me and kind of pointed me in the direction of all those songs that I love to sing, like traditional singer of the year. Like it's not something that I take lightly. It's such something that's so rooted in your ancestors, and for that reason, I feel like yeah, it's an award that I share with all of my ancestors and all the people who helped me along the way.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I've been following the Folk Music Awards, I think ever since 2022, because one of my friends, Irish Millie from Peterborough, she started being nominated, and I think ever since she's been nominated for every single year, including this one. And she hasn't picked up the award yet, but here's hoping.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Like just the fact that she's made three albums like before even turning 18 years old. It's so wild. I
Yeah.
think did she put out her first album when she was like 14?
So I think so, but she titled her album 13, so it implies that she made the album while she was that age.
That is just unbelievable. Like that is incredible. Like I don't think I put out my first solo album until I was in my 30s. So
Mhm.
she's already winning.
Oh yes, yeah. I have a copy of that album as a CD in my place currently, and I do listen to it often.
Nice, nice. Yeah, my cat is right beside me. So you hear that coughing noise? That's my cat. So I'm sorry about that. Yeah, no, I gotta go back and listen to that. Like I play guitar with fiddle players. So when I met her at the Canadian Folk Music Awards back in 2021, we totally like hit it off musically because in that time people were like still wearing masks and things were just opening up, but like, it was in Charlottetown that year, but we had jams in the lobby of the hotel every pretty much every night of the week, and so that was when I met her and her dad, and it was just yeah, she knows so many tunes, like she's so prolific
Oh
as
yes,
a fiddle player. Yeah.
yeah. She's a very inspiring person, and glad to
Yeah.
have got to know her. So I believe this year's folk music award takes place in St. John's, Newfoundland,
Yeah, it
and
did. Yeah.
I wonder if, how close is St. John's to PEI?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So it's way out there.
Mm,
It used to be its own country, like it didn't join Canada until I think it was 1949 or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, they were their own separate country for a while, and you do have to take a boat there, a ferry that is probably like an overnight ferry ride. So you like leave at 9 at night and it gets there at like 6 or 7 in the morning. And that's during the winter. During the summer, there's another ferry that is a longer ferry ride. But oh, yeah, and that's the other thing. You take that ferry, but once you arrive in Port aux Basques, you still have to drive another 8 hours to get to St. John's.
mm,
So I wasn't prepared to do all of that. Like that would be several days of travel. So I flew, and it was from Halifax. I live in Nova Scotia. I live in Antigonish, which is like I drove, my town is 2 hours to the airport, drove, and I got a 1 hour flight, which is really and it was a direct flight from Halifax to St. John's. So that was pretty awesome. Like it's a pretty awesome trip. It was really quick for me anyways, but I
mm,
know that at that time it was only a few weeks ago, but there was still some snow happening and some people's flights were delayed. There was some snow in Montreal, and yeah, I was just lucky that my flight was only delayed a few hours, and which actually was really fun because I did end up meeting a band in the airport and we ended up jamming
mhm.
in the airport. So
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So
yeah,
were
and that was
they, yeah,
the
were they
band
on
that
their
I
way
met.
to St. John's?
Yeah, they were on their way, and I could see that they had instruments. I totally was like, you're sitting in the airport and you're kind of like keeping a low profile, like, the flight's gonna come. So I wasn't really saying anything, but then our flight was like delayed 1 hour, 2 hours, and then it was like a second, third hour. I was like, they were playing a tune on the iPad that I recognize and that I do play myself on the accordion. So they're called Queen Kong, and they're from Toronto. They play original like klezmer influenced music. And I, being an accordion player, I like klezmer. That is one of the styles that I love to play. And then I did study some. Anyways, and they're like, I said, what did I say? I said, oh, I know that tune. I played on the accordion. Do you guys need an accordion player? And they're like, get out your accordion. And the girl in the band, Lori, she was like, how do you know that song? Like, where did you learn it? And then we realized that we knew each other, that we had met about 15 years ago at Claes Canada, which is a summer camp north of Montreal, a Yiddish music and culture dance theater culture camp. So we had been there together, and we had met 15 years ago. So we hadn't seen each other since then. So that was really cool.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the jam in the airport was really cool too, because there was a trumpet player in the band, a trombone player, a guitar player, and they all took out their instruments, and people gathered around and took videos and stuff. So it's kind of like, even though our flight was delayed, it was kind of an uplifting
Mhm.
kind of thing to play music in the airport. Who doesn't love
Yeah.
that?
Yes, it's gotta be one of those rare occasions where a flight delay is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if that is Air Canada that you're flying because I get delays while using that airline frequently.
Actually, that day we were with Porter.
Oh,
Yeah, we were with Porter Airlines, which I do recommend that airline.
mhm,
It's pretty chill, and they got free drinks and snacks and kind of yeah. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, Air Canada can be a doozy. There were some stories of people having to stay like 2 nights in Halifax
mhm.
on that trip. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have my own like Air Canada horror story too. I remember it was in 2021. I was finishing my studies and I was going back to my home country of Vietnam. And because of a snowstorm, on in Toronto, the flight had to be grounded, and I missed the connection from Vancouver, and I had to stay in Vancouver for like 2 or 3 days. Um, I have distant relatives there, so I stayed with them. So that's a very lucky thing. But because it was still COVID and the one of those like COVID tests that they make you take, had to do it again because it's only valid for what, 72 hours.
Oh, oh my gosh, yeah. Traveling during that time was, I luckily didn't have to, so I can only imagine.
Mhm. Yeah. How did you manage to survive the pandemic?
That's a good question. I actually, I find that I'm so busy and I'm that kind of a person who has trouble saying no to things. So I'm always on the go, I'm always busy, I'm always doing things. But when the pandemic broke out, it was like, okay, now I have an excuse to actually stay at home and work on my album and not go anywhere and not do anything social for once. So it was kind of like I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it myself. I was actually enrolled in university at the time.
Mhm.
So I also it wasn't like I had too many things canceled at the beginning because I didn't have too many things planned. I had a tour, like a house concert tour of Alberta that I was supposed to do, but which got canceled in that fall of 2020. But in a way, it was a good thing because it allowed me to finish my album. It gave me the time, and yeah, and a lot of there's a lot of bits and pieces on the album where I would send a message to a friend. I knew they were like me, they would do recording in their house. So I'd be like, "Hey, can you add some voice to this or can you add some fiddle to this song?" And so we would send the files back and forth. So I worked that way. And also, yeah, so I actually graduated in 2020. I finished the degree online. That was fine. And then I went and I had been living with some friends and so I didn't have like an apartment that I had to figure out how. Yeah, so I moved back in with my parents into a kind of a I fixed up this little room and I bought a desk and I set up. It was actually a really good room for recording in that house, because there were books like lining the walls, kind of like sound absorption, and there were windows. There was a lot of light in that room, so it was a good room to work and record in. And I kind of finished like adding little bits and pieces to the to that album that I made, Crossing the Causeway, that was nominated for that award. So I would put shakers and tambourines and guitar all in my little tiny little room that I with all the books around me and all the windows, like books on two walls and windows on the two other walls. So I survived the pandemic pretty well. I mean, and I had people around me. I was with my mother, father, and my sister were there as well, and we were out. We're out. We live in the country, so lots of nature around. I wasn't in a city, so I could go outside and walk around in the woods and go down the road to the beach. So it wasn't so bad. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, on one hand, you have your personal project, which is the album, which I think is wonderful. I got a chance to listen to it before we meet, and yeah, I love every minute of it.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet, John.
Yeah, and on the other hand, you're living with your family. So yeah, of course, being stuck together as a family can be a drag, but yeah, overall, I think it's good.
Yeah. I won't say anything negative in this interview about
Yeah,
that. Just
I know.
it's nice to, like especially when your parents are getting older, like always nice to spend time with them.
Hmm.
So, yeah. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, there can be times too, let's be honest.
Yes, of
Let's be
course.
honest.
Um, yeah. So, what was the university that you attended, and yeah, what was the program?
Oh yeah, I was doing a Bachelor of Education degree. It was a 10-month program at St. Thomas University in Fredericton. So I was in another province. I was in New Brunswick.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was like and I did that program like later in life. So it was nice there were a few other people my age in the program. And yeah, so yeah, before that I had been working at a school. We have an Acadian school board here in Nova Scotia where the children go to school like all it's all French, you know. It's like a French first language school. And I had been working at that one of those schools in Cape Breton, just like part-time as a music teacher, and I kind of liked that. So I thought, well, I better actually go and get the qualification that's required to do this job properly, and like and learn more, like learn more about like the psychology of teaching other people, you know, and like the techniques that you can use to help people learn. So I was interested in that topic, and I thought, okay, I got accepted to the program, and off I went. And I was also, you know, being a musician, like it's such a big part of my identity. I really do identify first and foremost as a musician rather than a teacher. So I kind of had a little bit of a mental blockage, but I thought I'm gonna just go to their orientation and see what it's like, see what the vibe is like, see what the professors are like, see what this orientation is all about. And I went, and they had a guest speaker, like a keynote speaker, and it was like he was speaking directly to me. He's like, I used to be a musician, and he was older like me too. He's like, I used to be a musician. I was in punk rock bands and blah blah blah. And now I work as a music teacher and I love it, and I still do my music. And so I was like, I was kind of sold on it after that orientation. So I went through with it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And congratulations on your graduation.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. I think like you, I received my bachelor's degree on well, I had my graduation online too. There was a graduation ceremony except for Zoom, which I don't think I attended, but the degree was mailed to me. So you know,
Oh yeah.
there's that dignity. Um,
Yeah, me too. I had the online graduation. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm guessing you're still teaching music now, right?
I am. Yeah, I am now. Yeah, it's my I the year after I graduated, it was still the pandemic, and I was still working on that album, and I had actually had gigs happening, and there was surprisingly a lot going on with music. So I didn't apply for any jobs right away. I just kept on with my work in music, and I really put a push on to finish the recording. Um, and then I think there was one point, it was like 2021, and it was like that time when things were getting canceled again, and I'm like, oh no, I just lost these gigs and all the money. I'm like, maybe I'm just gonna send in my name as like a substitute at least. And then they called me up, and the school, like the Acadian school down the road from me, their music teacher was just like leaving. So I've been there for 3 years, and it's a grade primary to grade 12 um, school. So it's kind of fun to work with all the different levels, and yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, Speaking of Fredericton, New Brunswick, I had a chance to meet with a band. I think they're from there, or at least they're from New Brunswick last year. They are an Arcadian folk band, and they did get nominated in the this year's CFMA too. La Famille Leblanc is their name. Yeah, and of course you know them. Yeah, they're a wonderful team. I ordered a CD from them, and I'm waiting for that to show up in this country. But
Yeah.
yeah, so to what extent have you immersed yourself during your time in Fredericton in the Arcadian music scene there?
Oh yeah, the music scene in Fredericton was so cool. There's so many different sides of it. I'm just trying to think of some of the things that stood out on the music scene there. Well, actually, okay, so I had this friend, Krista, who opened a cafe. It was called the Tipsy Muse, and they had a lot of shows there, really intimate little shows. So I discovered some great artists there. Sometimes I would go and take a chance, and it might not be an artist that I really knew or heard of, but it would like you'd go and you'd just be so close to the artists. So that was cool. The Harvest Music Festival was amazing. I saw some really big name artists there, like Lucinda Williams. I saw her show, and one of like a Fredericton, like a one of New Brunswick's biggest stars, Matt Anderson. I saw him perform in a church. It was just like a beautiful acoustics, beautiful setting, packed house. Like so many people go to that festival. It's like so well attended, and there's like an outdoor tent. There's outdoor tents, and they even had, I remember they had like a festival in the winter in an outdoor tent, which I
Mhm.
can't remember exactly what band was playing, but I just remember dancing to warm up. And oh, and then we had a lot of jam sessions there, and there was a cidery, like maybe every Sunday we'd go and play tunes together. So I met a lot of musicians that way. Yeah, and oh, they would also have these like cover, like kind of a community um show where they would invite a bunch of different artists to play cover song. Like they would pick, okay, tonight's like we're tribute to Bob Dylan or tribute to Van Morrison. I think I participated in the Van Morrison tribute concert, and I learned a bunch of Van songs for that. So it was a really fun time.
Mhm. Which ones?
Which ones? I learned because the crazy thing about Van Morrison is he is still releasing albums.
Yeah.
Like he's so prolific. And so I learned a song that was from one of his more recent albums called something about Memory Lane. If I can't recall exactly, but it was it was autumn, and there was like kind of the imagery of autumn, and I ended up singing it for a Remembrance Day concert. So it was a good song for that time of year. Oh, and I'm just remembering, and I can't, yeah, I sang some other songs, don't remember, but that one really stood out to me because it really fit in with that time. But I'm just remembering like the very last show that happened before the pandemic. It was like it was a St. Patrick's Day kind of theme show, and they had this thing in Fredericton called a pub choir.
Mhm.
So you have like almost like a choir leader, but it's anyone can come and sing. And we did like an Irish themed pub night. And there were 200 people in a brewery. And there was me and another woman on fiddle, and then the kind of the guy, Mike Ravener. Oh, my cat's meowing at me. You hear that? And Mike Bravener, who was directing. And yeah, imagine that. Like, that was a really great, triumphant last show, I gotta say. Like 200 people singing the Black Velvet Band. It was a very memorable way to go out.
Mhm. Yeah. I need to brush up on my Van Morrison music over, but I remember listening to two of his albums. One is Astral Weeks, and the other is Moondance, and I enjoyed
Oh
both of them.
yeah.
Yeah. When I
Oh,
returned
those are
from
so classic.
yeah, when I returned from Canada back in 21, I bought a CD of Astral Weeks and I gave it to my parents. I think it's still there. Hopefully, they recently moved houses, so I hope they still have that with them. Yeah,
Do they like it? Do you like it?
um, I heard that they like it quite a bit. I think it suits their music taste.
Nice. What did you grow up listening to in your household?
Um, yeah. Oh God, that's a lot of things really. I remember the first like real music I ever heard is Kenny G. Yeah, that was like when I was like 4 or 5, and my parents would put on that to put me to sleep basically.
Nice. Nice.
And I think my dad and my mom has different tastes in music. My mother, she enjoys more Vietnamese sort of like soul music from like the old days. And my dad, he would enjoy uh how we call it soft rock and I guess adult contemporary. Um, so
Nice.
so I still like pick up some of the music that my dad likes. I think John Denver and the Eagles stick out to me. Um, and but unfortunately, I didn't pick up anything from my mom. So, um, but one thing about my dad is that he grew up mm, during the post-war era, so the post-Vietnam War, so to speak. And he went to the Philippines to study. I think it was for his PhD. And from there he discovered Western popular music, and he would bring a lot of it back. And I think over time, some uh, Western pop music would make it to Vietnam, and there were a few songs that were like really stuck out to my parents' generations that would be somewhat less well known in America or in Canada, and I
Hmm.
found to be something quite amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how there's these artists who are big like somewhere else, like big elsewhere, but um like I wouldn't necessarily know who they are. And I found that also when I lived in Quebec. There was some artists like that, American artists who were like huge in Quebec, but I had never heard of them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's this expression, right? Big in Japan. That's the one where they would like jokingly put on artists when they kind of make it in in their native home country, but they would make it somewhere else, Asia in particular.
Yeah, and of course there's that wicked Tom Waits song, Big in Japan.
Tell me about your upbringing in music.
Yeah, so where I grew up here in Antigonish County, Nova Scotia. Um, so there's a lot of different influences. First of all, the radio was always on in my parents' house. Like there's the radio on in the bathroom upstairs, the radio on in the kitchen downstairs. It would be like CBC talk radio, so a mixture of talking and songs. So whatever, and like in Canada we have the CanCon regulations, so like the radios have to play a certain percentage of Canadian music. So I think the music that was kind of coming in my ears through the radio was a lot of Canadian and even like local, like maritime Eastern Canadian artists. So I heard a lot of that growing up. Also, my town is famous for their local radio station, which in the old days there would be like an hour, and even when I was young, there would be an hour every day of fiddle music, like Nova Scotian, Scottish, Celtic fiddle music, which is a genre in and of itself. Like there's so many hundreds of like instrumental Cape Breton fiddle, East Coast fiddle music that exist. So, and then I came from like the road. I grew up on a dirt road, and um, my grandfather's cousin, he was one of the very first fiddlers to record a vinyl record back in the 30s. And in those days, you had to go to Montreal to, that was the nearest recording studio. So anyways, but so even like before I was born, like that house was just known as a place people would go to play music and party. And I think that even like when I was young, that house continued to be that kind of a place where you would go, it'd be fiddle tapes at the party, and I spent a lot of time there. And yeah, so my cousin, he had the fiddle music going, so that definitely was in my ears all the time. And I have a bunch of cousins who are very well known internationally as fiddle, like playing Scottish fiddle music. So yeah, my family is Scottish. We were Scottish immigrants, like on my mother's side. They came over about 200 years ago. And so surprisingly, amazingly, like they have kept their culture over those 200 years. And I do even like on my album, like I do sing in Gaelic, which would be like my ancestors' language. Like I'm assimilated to English. Like my ancestors didn't act, if you go far back enough, they did not actually speak English at all. But anyways, yeah, so on my album, Crossing the Causeway, there's three songs in Gaelic on there, and I do speak conversational Gaelic. And like when growing up, like my mother would take me to a lot of Gaelic language learn and song learning weekends. So that was like a part of my upbringing as well. Those traditional songs, and a lot of them are really fast, like mouth music, and then there's some that are like more wistful and laments, you know. And my mother she always sang in Gaelic choirs, and I would often like join her. I would just like join the choir for their concerts and things and their practices. And so yeah, so and then of course, like I guess when you get older, you're like you're trying to fit in with everybody, and you're trying to like listen to all the cool music that the kids are listening to. I had an older cousin, he had an incredible collection of CDs and all the, the Pearl Jam and the Tragically Hip, and I would like sneak those CDs and I would listen to them. I would put them on tape cassettes. I would get music from my friends. I was just like I was addicted to music, and I listened to everything from rap like Young MC to all of that. So I just love all kinds of music, and I just soaked it all in. Yeah.
It's wonderful. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the CanCon requirement because when I was doing the radio show that would become this podcast, I had to adhere to the CanCon requirements too. I believe it was 35, if I can remember it correctly. 35% of the music that was featured has to be, from a Canadian artist, and you have these categories too, like origin and artists and songwriter and everything. Um, it it was difficult at first to select artists that are Canadian because when I entered the radio business, so to speak, I didn't know too many except for the really big ones. I guess Neil Young and Leonard Cohen and all that. But over time, what I find is that there would be musicians who are either indie or up and coming who would send me their material and
Hmm.
and over time, I thought, in addition to featuring their music, I would invite them to the show for a conversation like this one. Um, um, partly because I was kind of tired of carrying the show by myself. I think someone else to share the load would be nice, and over time it would the show would evolve into this conversational format. And as an sort of homage to those days, whenever I feature a musician on the show, what I would do customarily is to feature a song of theirs at the end of the podcast episode after this conversational piece. And of course, yours would be included too.
Oh, thanks. So, was that radio show that you had when you went to school in Peterborough?
Yeah, yeah, Trent.
At the Nice.
Yeah, Trent Radio is a station, and back then I thought of calling the show Musically Speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good name.
Mhm. Yeah, and let's talk about how you name your album.
Yeah. Well, the album is sort of paying tribute to when I used to live in Cape Breton. I lived there for 2 years, and yeah, crossing the causeway. So Cape Breton is an island, and it's linked to mainland Nova Scotia, where I am right now, actually, by this bridge that the bridge was built in the 60s. It's not exactly a bridge, it's like it's a causeway. So it's like I guess they put some gravel and rocks and built, and so it touches the ocean floor. Um so that was kind of the concept of this album, was kind of like I sing in French, I sing in Gaelic, I sing some songs that I wrote. I sing some more modern songs by Cape Breton songwriters, and I play some of those tunes that, like some of those instrumental dance tunes that I would have heard on that radio show or at my cousin's house all those years ago. like fiddle tunes, but I adapted them to the accordion. But anyways, and I'm also influenced by the indigenous culture there, the Mi'kmaq culture. So there's some influence of that those sounds as well. So I just want to show how all those cultures are connected and like their connections run so deep. It's like the causeway that touches the ocean floor. They just go below the surface of what you see, and they can all like coexist together on one album and sound like they all fit together. So that was kind of my goal with this project. And I also had lots of friends who joined me on it. So, from all those different cultures. So I have some Acadian friends who sing on there with me, and some Mi'kmaq friends singing on here with me and playing different instruments, and of course some fellow Scottish folks. And like my last name is Irish to be actually,
Mhm.
and it's not uncommon. Um, because actually Scottish and Irish culture were very close at one time. It was like, one people, one empire. Our languages are very close. But so yeah, in a nutshell, crossing the causeway, it's just kind of to show that the bridge of cultures.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I really like the cover art too. I think for the benefit of the people viewing, you might want to show your CD and tell us about the
Sure, yeah.
artwork.
It's I used ink for this.
Mhm. Oh
It's
wow.
ink on, it kind of wraps around to the back. My friend Laura Stinson, who is also a puppeteer, she's an incredible all-around artist. She and I, like, we talked about what the image would be. And then she came and she did a beautiful watercolor, and it was like purples and it was kind of dark. But then I had this whole thing where I had started doing these drawings on orange paper with green emerald colored ink, kind of like the colors of the Irish flag or the
Mhm.
Indian or the flag of India. Um, and anyways, so I kind of took her idea and I sort of traced it. So then I redid it with the vibrant ink that I love to use. And but the funny thing is I made some mistakes. So this is a secret. I'm telling you this, these are the secrets, Chuang. This is actually three drawings like put together digitally. So the little figurine of me here is actually from her original painting, and it's
Oh wow.
just photoshopped onto my ink drawing, and it just looks like you can tell that it's manipulated with the computer, but thank goodness for technology.
Mhm.
And on my first drawing, I spilt ink on the sky, so I just like did a whole other sky. So the sky is like the other drawing. It's
Mhm.
just pieced together like a quilt.
Mhm. Well, for what it's worth, your secret is safe with me and of course the people who listen to the show. So
It's all good. It's insider knowledge. I also made like two fonts to go with this. I found out it's not that difficult to make your own fonts and that so it looks like handwriting. So there's another word to the wise for those of you listening who do graphic design. I'm into stuff like that. I love to draw and paint and all of it. So yeah.
yeah, and another point too is that I love to collect CDs, so there may come a time when I actually would like to purchase one of the copies if
Well,
you do have them.
listen, as a thank you for doing this interview, I'm gonna send you a copy. You just send me your snail
Okay,
mail address. I love sending snail mail, honestly. It's
okay.
something
Well,
that
thank you.
my friends my friends know this about me, and that's kind of part of like the first song on the album, Dear Island, is kind of like a letter. So I'm just like writing a letter to the island. That's sort of the inspiration for those lyrics. But I love sending snail mail, and I don't always get it in return. Like people don't always send me a letter or a postcard back, and that's fine. Like I don't actually mind, but when I do, like the other day, one of my friends, shout out to my friend Zach in Louisiana, he actually sent me a postcard back. So
Awesome.
all the love.
I think I'm going to have to return to the habit of sending people postcards from Budapest. Last year I was in Vienna and I would do that all the time. So yeah, so I'll remember to send you my address here, and you'll have to worry about the international shipping, which can be a headache. And yeah, I'll remember to send you a postcard.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, another thing, I made it thin enough that it can be pretend to be a letter mail, but you're not really supposed to do that. You're supposed to declare it as an object. So yeah, it's all good. Thank you so much in advance. It is time consuming to write letters and postcards, honestly.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
I did do a lot of that during the pandemic too, because I felt like it was a way to keep in touch. Like even though I couldn't socialize with people, I felt like I'm having a little conversation by writing a little note. So yeah.
Yeah. I think these days, with all of the school and the show, I'm way too busy, to carve out any free time of my own anyhow.
It's fair.
Yeah. I wonder, on your end, do you find that keeping a busy life is manageable?
My life, to be honest, is very, very busy. Um, and I just keep telling myself that it is manageable, that I'm gonna get out the door at the right time to get to where I need to be on time. Like it just every time it's a miracle. But
Yeah.
it's very busy, yeah, especially like I'm working this day job right now, and then I got gigs on the weekend, and then not only the gigs on the weekend, it's like when you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur, and you're responsible for promoting those and like signing contracts sometimes for them, and keeping things rolling. And one thing that I find that is like it's hard to find time to be creative and actually rehearse my instrument. So I'm feeling that I'm suffering of that. But I do have I find also like making time, even having the accountability of doing writing with friends. So I just have this couple of friends. We have what we call Write Club. So we get together and we give each other writing prompts. We bring journals and we just do a lot of free writing, and then we read it back to each other and see what other our reactions are. So I did that a couple of weeks ago, and that felt really good. Very therapeutic, and lots of ideas for new songs coming out of that. So that's exciting.
Mhm. Yeah. So you mentioned having a few Gaelic songs in the album. I've listened to them, and pardon my lack of understanding of the Gaelic language, I would not try to even pronounce their the song titles. So but yeah, I find it quite interesting because I always associate Gaelic with the Irish, and you've mentioned having a Scottish background, and
Yeah.
I mean, if I can make, from what I can understand, the Scottish-Irish relationship, I think culturally they're close, but because of the whole situation with the division of Ireland, there can be some political contentions there.
Actually, like I was kind of alluding to it earlier. It was once one empire.
Mhm.
I'm a Highland Scot, so from the north. And it was once one big Celtic, one culture, and the languages are so similar that I was on actually speaking of Austria, speaking of Vienna, I was on tour years ago with two groups from Ireland, and one was from the Gaeltacht, where they do speak Gaelic as
Mhm.
part of their daily lives. And, some nights after the concert and after a couple of drinks, we would speak to one another, and we could understand each other. They are different slightly, like maybe similar like to maybe Spanish Portuguese kind of
Oh.
close, but it's definitely one kind of world. There's so much going back and forth. The water between Scotland and Ireland is not very big, so and especially, yeah, even with my Irish ancestor, he he moved to England first. He was a mining engineer, and then the mine shut down, and he moved to England, and then eventually up to Scotland. And yeah, there's definitely no hard feelings between Highland Scots and the Irish. We're one people for sure. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and of course, you also have a couple of songs where you sang in the French language. I think Pardonnez-moi, I don't speak too much French. Was
You
it?
just did.
Yeah, I tried my best. I learned a few phrases there. Was it Je parle un peu français, I suppose.
Oh, très bien. Très bien.
But yeah, I've been looking these days to listen to music that are not of the English language. So either instrumental music or music from other parts than the Anglosphere. And one thing I've landed I think I've landed on Ravi Shankar so far. He's this great sitarist. Um,
So good.
yeah, he's wonderful. You should listen to his soundtrack for the great Bengali film Pather Panchali, the one with directed by Satyajit Ray. It's phenomenal.
So good.
Phenomenal
It's crazy
soundtrack
because I
to
was just
film.
mentioning sitar. I was mentioning sitar today to a friend out of the blue, but yeah, that was one record that my parents had in their record collection growing up. So I listened to like the Ravi Shankar vinyl when I was young, and later, I think I was probably in my early 20s. I used to go to folk festivals all the time I would volunteer and I'd just soak in the
Mhm,
music. And one year at the Stan Rogers Folk Festival, they had a sitar tabla duo, and it was probably the best live music I've ever heard in my life. It was like, transcendental. Like you felt like you were
mhm.
floating. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, I hear it's because the Indians they use a different musical scales than ours. The 12 note that we are familiar with. I think the Indians use a different scale entirely.
Yeah, it's the classical. And then even within that country, there's so many different languages and so many different traditions. It's just like that was one thing that I did during the pandemic. I was on this app that I found called Clubhouse,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know about Clubhouse.
Yeah, I know that it's where you set up meetings and have chats with people. That's
Yeah, so during the pandemic, there were these 24-hour music rooms, and the hosts were in India,
oh.
and it was just song after song after song, and so many good singers and different languages, and I just like got addicted to being in those rooms and like learning as much as I could about all the different parts of that country. It's just so fascinating. There's like no end to what you can learn.
Oh yeah. Um I think because I'm very much curious about different cultures, but I don't always have the means to travel. So I think for now it's learning about other cultures via books and music and film is kind of like my alternative, and it does not it does not completely substitute for the real thing, but so far it has worked for me, and it is something that I enjoy very much.
I'm with you on that. I'll send you some of my playlists because I do love musical discovery, and maybe maybe there'll be some things on my playlist that might strike your fancy.
Oh, you're welcome to. Thank you very much.
Hey, anything to spread the musical love?
Yes, I feel. So I wonder, how do you feel when you listen to music that are sung and performed in languages that you cannot understand? Because for me, it's always amazing. I think for a time I listened to like Spanish pop music, contemporary, I guess, reggaeton. I can pick up a few words because I understand a few words in Spanish. Uh,
Mhm.
but overall, the experience is it's something to remember. Because you feel like a visitor, you feel like a stranger there. And the stranger the experience, the better.
Yeah, I think it's something that I know like there's people who like feel very uncomfortable when they listen to music they don't understand the lyrics, but I think it's to me if there's something that like it's something I've always kind of done and I just always love going to concerts where you might not understand the lyrics like even when I was young my mother see my I love folk music. I love traditional music. My mother loves classical music. So she would take us to classical concerts, and always the singers are singing in German or Italian. And then even like growing up going to church, like a lot of times the songs are in Latin and um yeah, no, I love listening to music in other languages and actually the majority of my playlists that I listen to are it like other like languages. I listen to a lot of Portuguese music. I used to play in a Brazilian band with a Portuguese singer from Brazil, Afro-Brazilian music we played. Flavia Nascimento. She is now a solo artist. She lives in Quebec City, but she is amazing. She is just an incredible human, an incredible entertainer. But so, and then I started singing in Portuguese with that band a little bit, even though I don't even really speak the language. But I feel like learning songs in another language is a really good way to start learning it because you're hearing someone else pronounce the words and you're learning like the turns of phrase. Um, so I do really love, yeah, learning. Yeah, and I'm like you, I love learning about other cultures through music. And and it's crazy when you think like growing up in this like where I grew up, like the traditional name is not Nova Scotia. Of course, that is a colonial name. It's Mi'kmaq, and the land of the language of this land is Mi'kmaq, and it's something that we were all like very cut off from growing up. It was you would rarely like even well, like, the name of my town is derived from Mi'kmaq, but now in like recent years, and especially since I started working at the Acadian school, I there was one song that kind of made a resurgence where through that song I've been starting to develop an ear because you want to develop an ear for a language before you start learning it. So I've started developing a bit of an ear for Mi'kmaq, and I've been collaborating with some artists. So I think it's a really good thing for everybody to just start like I think that the music is like a door into the language. It's like if you can just listen to one song and repeat it and just learn the way the sounds of the language, then you're much more likely that you're going to uh, be able to learn it, you know?
Mhm.
Or even if you don't ever learn the whole language, at least you'll have some sense of what it sounds like, maybe a few sentences or words. So I think it's
Mhm.
really beneficial. And I know that the kids at my school that learned this honor song, like it's something that really stays with them and then something that they really love. And yeah, yeah, it's a really good question because like it's true that I have friends who are like, oh, like turn that off. Like I don't or like sometimes they'll sing in Gaelic and people will be in the audience and they'll be like, I don't understand anything you said. I'm like, it doesn't really matter if you didn't understand what sang about. Like it's actually probably better that you didn't understand because it's more about the feeling that you get from it. And even sometimes like I find that Anglo society and the Anglophone culture and tradition is a little bit something a polite like almost too polite about it where there's like certain things I don't really feel comfortable singing about or talking about in English where I whereas I can in French or Gaelic because those cultures are a little bit more like party cultures or like honest I find that there's a little bit more honesty in those songs and actually some of the things I sing about are pretty shocking and I would rather not even explain the songs sometimes, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. I know that there are like those few like Irish drinking songs that can be pretty out there.
Yeah, yeah. And even deeper things. And like that, my first album is a bunch of songs that a lot of them that I wrote in French. And this maybe I also don't want my mother to understand them because maybe I wanted to work some things out through of past relationships and talk about those things. And it's just like safer to do it in French, and then my mother can't like judge me for them,
Oh,
for example.
yes. I've had some experience listening to like French language pop music too, and they have certain expressions there that I think when you translate into English, you find it very hard to speak in the English language, but when it is spoken by a French speaker, it comes out quite naturally.
Yeah, yeah. So, but speaking of French, I got to tell you, Chong, that in my French learning journey, like I didn't grow up, and I know a lot of people in Canada grow up going to French immersion, but I didn't have that opportunity. But when I was 18, I went and lived in this small village called Jonquière, and I lived with a family. And there were a few rooms in the house, and one of the rooms that they were renting was to a Vietnamese he worked in the town, and his French was really good. So I was like, oh, so I always associate Vietnam and French together a little bit. And I was wondering, like, do your parents speak French?
Unfortunately, no. I think after the colonial period, which is 1945, that would be my grandparents' generation. The nationalization process has effectively purged our country of whatever French influence that we may have had. So I suppose the generations of my great grandparents and those who are more bookish would know quite a bit of French, and there were certain like nationalist movements that were somewhat influenced by French, but the one that we end up with, Ho Chi Minh, he studied in France, but he didn't bring much of that cultural influence back to back to home. He was much more influenced by Vietnamese folk culture. So that's where
Oh,
we are.
nice. Yeah, that's something that now I'm talking to you, I'm like interested in what groups your mother listened to, and I just love like listening to old music. So now I'm like, oh yeah, Vietnamese folk culture. I need to get into that now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not that in tune with Vietnamese folk music, but you're welcome to explore that. Yeah. So, final question to you, Mary Beth. Um, what does music mean to you?
What does music mean to me? Whenever I'm asked a question like this, I'm always like, yeah, music is my whole life. It's like it really is such a huge part of my identity, and kind of my value as a human is really wrapped up in it, and also kind of like my survival. It's like I grew up in a house where the result, like I say, the radio was always on, like, but I'm like that. It's like I feel very uncomfortable when there's no music on. Like, so I'm always listening to music, and it's like a survival mechanism for me. Um, and for me, it is the way I make friends, you know? So I will share a song, and then that attracts friends to me because I'm actually a really shy person. So if I get up on stage and I sing, it's a way of that people can then approach me, and it's really always how I've made friends. Yeah. So it means so much to me. I don't know what I would do without music. It is like literally a lifeline for me. It's like it is life to me. It's all my yeah, yeah, that's what I gotta that's my answer.
Yeah, I think when I was growing up, I was a pretty solitary kid. So I've always thought of making friends through our shared taste in music, and I think with that show, I've managed to do that. So
That's
that's one of the ways that music has helped me.
that's so cool. Yeah, it's interesting that we share that kind of uh yeah, friends through music commonality.
I think that's a
Well,
wonderful
you'll have to
happening.
ask your mom which Vietnamese artists, folk artists that I should listen to, and and you'll let me know in your postcard.
Oh, of course, yes. I'll keep that in mind. Okay. It was good talking to you, Mary Beth, Carty. Thank you for joining the show.
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much. I look forward to listening to all your back episodes because I was just listening to one before I got on with you. It was so good.